My guest today is a comedy special on Dry Bar and has appeared on Conan and The Late Late Show with James Corden. I'm excited to welcome Andrew Sleighter.
Hey,
Thanks
what's
for
going
coming
on,
on,
man?
buddy.
This is so professional.
I know. I wanted to I fucked up your credits when I opened for you
Yeah.
a couple times, so I was like, I at least got to get this right
Well, it's good to see that you take the podcast seriously,
more seriously than in
not
front of
my-
large amounts of people.
my big shows.
Your weekend shows. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back home. I've been on the road a lot, so good to be back in Portland. You know, this Airbnb we're in is so lovely.
It's got a lot of nice. This is anytime I travel, I end up recording in like a weird Airbnb. So this time I need to put the art in the background.
Yeah, I wish this was my basement.
It's-
This is way nicer than the basement I record in.
It's not bad. I mean, for the heat wave that we've been in, it's just been like crazy. Like, I picked the worst weekend to come to Portland.
Dude, I moved out of LA. I do this as a bit. I don't know if you heard this or not, but I moved from LA to get away from the heat, you know, and I grew up in Seattle and everything. And that summer we were up here. It was when it was 120 degrees in Portland, like broke every record. It was hotter than anywhere in Dallas or anywhere in Texas, you know. So I had a bit where I said it was so hot. There were protesters outside putting statues back up for the shade. That was my bit.
Yeah, that's. After just 100 degrees out here,
Yeah.
I can fucking. I mean, it was like
It's
just
it's horrible
beating
because
down on you.
and no one has AC.
yeah.
That's what the rest of the country doesn't understand. Like I was in where the hell was Missouri last weekend at a club, and anywhere it's hot. I mean, it's like 90s. It's humid, you know, but everywhere you walk in, it's freezing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
and it was driving me crazy. I was getting because I'm used. They wear their coats and shit because they know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just shorts, t-shirt everywhere, flip flops.
Then you
go
pop
sit
inside.
down in a bar, like a brewery, and you're like freezing your ass
Yeah.
off. And then you there's no even outside seating because they just don't
Nobody does
mess
it.
with that. Yeah, so it's like different culture. But,
Portland's interesting too. I mean, there is AC here, which is that's what we've been doing just to escape the heat. Is
Yeah.
just go to every restaurant, got
Yeah.
sushi in the middle of the day. But
yeah.
I've been to Portland twice before.
You said that like it was weird. Oh, we did this. We were crazy. We got sushi in the middle of the day.
Well, I never.
You know how you
people-
normally get sushi at 4 a.m? Not us. When it's hot.
I never have gotten sushi when it's hot as shit outside. I always
Well, yeah, it's
assumed it
that's
was
true.
fish and heat, I don't know. I was like, that just seems like I'm gonna get sick from that, but it was the shit. It was really
it's
good.
great. Yeah, they got refrigerators and stuff.
Yeah.
They figured it all out. I like that when people are they're because I used to go to cheap. There was a place in LA where I lived called Rock and Roll Sushi, and they'd have this insane happy hour from noon to 4, where beers were $3, and you could just eat like a king for
Mhm.
$25 or something. So we'd go every once in a while, and but then there, sometimes you ever hear about people like in Missouri, and there's a Red Lobster or something. Oh, I wouldn't eat the shrimp at the Red Lobster in Missouri.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this shit is coming, the catch of the day right off the docks. The Red Lobster in Maine also has something flown from Russia 2
for
days
sure.
ago. You know what I mean? It's all these people are oh, wouldn't eat sushi in Minnesota. Why not?
It might be better there because the supply lines are
Right.
running faster
Yeah.
rather than on the coast, right?
Yeah. It's easier to get a truck into Missouri than it is to New York City right now. Or
for
something.
sure.
But
So wait, how long have you lived out here for?
3 years.
3 years.
So we moved before the pandemic. I met my wife in LA, and we're in the same spot for I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and we moved up here because we wanted a house mostly. I mean, kind of had that realization of all I do is stand up. I'm a horrible actor. I had some writing jobs, but I don't it's a job, all I want to do is stand up. And so you can kind of do that from anywhere. And then my wife was doing improv, which you definitely want to be in like LA or some other major market for, Chicago. But then she got out of that after just kind of got burnt out on like the UCB thing. And so she got into screenwriting more. And so we're like, well, you can do that from anywhere. So we just wanted a house. So Portland was like kind of like more close to where I was from. She had lived here before. It's closer to my family, closer to some of her family, and so we could get a cheap house here at the time. We got our place for like under $500,000, which we were the only offer on the house, you know, and so you can't really do that anymore. We just got lucky timing wise, and we couldn't afford the house. Like once COVID hit, my wife she had a day job like at this real estate place doing marketing. And then I made my taxes look good the year before. Because like comedians, you can just make your taxes look like whatever you want. I can either make it look like I'm rich as shit, but if I use all my write-offs, I look like the poorest dude.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, you hit the poverty line. And we used to do that with Obamacare. Do you do Obamacare?
No. Okay. I'm still working.
You got a real job. Okay, so with Obamacare, you have to be, especially in the Trump year, like so when Obama was president, they made Obamacare good. And then, as you might expect, but then like you could basically get these, they call them tax credits, but it's just basically like healthcare's cheaper if you make a certain amount of money. And so you're trying to keep your income. If you make like $120,000, you're screwed. Like, you know, but if you like, there was a sweet spot between like, I don't know what it was, but let's just say like between like 30 and 60, you could get some discounts. And then, but if you were under,
such a tax, like,
dude,
you know more about taxes than anybody have had on.
Well, that's a sick brag for a comedian.
Yeah.
No, but you have to be. So like, but if you were under 30, they would put you on the like Medi-Cal broke, like, and you don't want to be on that because it's free, but you're screwed if anything happens. You're basically waiting like a 2-year line for, you know, hand surgery or whatever. So we would manipulate it. So I would literally go in and I go, here's how much we made. And then it would say, you're on this. We're like, well, I don't like that. And so I just start over.
Yeah,
and I go, this is how much we made. And like, I didn't even really know. So when we were gearing up to buy a house, I just made myself look as good as I could on paper. And she had a job. So we looked good for like a year. But any other year of our lives, if a bank looked at us, they'd be like, fucking no. No way.
So funny.
We're going to give them money. So
goddamn. Then
COVID hit, and then it screwed everything. So I'm like, yeah, there was literally probably a 3-month window when we were eligible to buy a house, and we got it done.
That's great. Hey, before I forget, anybody watching, hit that like, subscribe, notifications bell so you get our new content. And do you have a YouTube channel at all?
Yeah, I do have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Andrew Sleighter.
Check that out as well. So you moved from LA up here. Like I've been up here for like, I guess 4 days now, and you're from Seattle originally.
Yeah,
Portland's like it's like a weird. It literally is in between Seattle and LA, and like it kind of has aspects of both to it here.
It's interesting. It's like way different than Seattle. It's funny because I feel like it gets lumped in with Seattle all the time, but it's way different.
It's so different.
It's like Seattle, especially now. Nice. You think, wait, where?
Here, I think.
Here,
like,
they're nicer?
I thought they were like more like welcoming, and I mean, at least the comics.
Yeah, it's a little more like, Portland's got a little more like working class, crunchier, you know, a little more real. Seattle is the extreme sort of Scandinavian, dead-eyed, just mind your own business.
Yeah.
Talk to your family, but no one says I love you. Like, I don't know, maybe that was just like my experience, but Seattle, it's so tech now too. Like Seattle, that was before my time in Seattle. You know, there's like Microsoft, but now it's like half of everybody works in tech, and they're like by nature like autistic or whatever, you know. So like, there's no, it's not getting friendlier.
It's
you know what I mean?
Strange. It's crowds, like the differences in crowds here versus there from what I experienced. It just like
crowds here are amazing, and that's the number one question I get is like, oh, in Portland you can't say anything. It's like it is so the opposite of that. Crowds here have heard all the correct, they have all the information.
Mm-hmm.
They're aware of like the proper way to terminology for just about everything, and they're so clued in. They're willing to also joke about it, whereas there are some crowds that are like the people talk about the PC. I hate even saying woke because I feel like that word's been totally like overused and like changed. Like it started out as this one, but anyway, whatever you want to call it, there are some crowds that like are tight because of that. But not Portland crowds are like very aware, but then also like down to make fun of themselves, make fun of everybody. So
it's interesting.
These crowds here, I think, are super fun, and they're like eager, that's the difference from LA is like LA crowds don't want to be there and they're mad that they're not on stage, and they're like, it's very arms crossed. You prove it. Here they're like, oh, this is cool. You're doing stand up. There's gonna be a show tonight. Like,
dude, they've tipped us every show I've done. People have like put money in the bucket. And the producers have like been super generous with sharing that. And like there's a huge communal aspect. Like I have a buddy that's down here, Brent Lowry, who he was supposed to do this with us tonight, but he had to go up to Tacoma, and like he put in a good word for me on behalf, and like people super welcoming, and we kind of have that going right now in Seattle. Like our class that's up there is like really supporting one another, and it's cool to see. Like, because when I came in, it was a little like there was more of a divide. Yeah. And down here, it's just like it seems like people are like going for it and like supporting the community, which is rad.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's true. And like, I will say the rep that Seattle has in Portland is like Portland comics. I guess this goes back to like when I was in Seattle, so for a long time. So it's not even any one generation or anything. Mm-hmm. But like the rep is that if you're a Seattle comic, like Portland, you can come down, do a bunch of shows, and they'll try get you paid as much as they can. Nothing like amazing, but just
something.
And then if it's reverse, if Portland comics go up to Seattle, they're like, it's always crickets. Yeah. Like they never get up. And it's like there is something to Seattle, and this might have changed, because I'm like a little unplugged from some of the local stuff now, but like there is something that's always been this way about Seattle, where it's very fragmented, where like there's pockets, but then the scene never knows the whole scene. Mm-hmm. It's like for instance, I started at Giggles, the comedy club now Laughs. There were like this Giggles comics, and then there were underground comics, and then there was an alt scene.
That's what Drew said. He was like Sharks and Jets.
Yeah, it's like, totally. It's like but nerdier than that even. It was like so lame that anyone cared.
And was Giggles more? Because I can't remember what episode number it was, but Drew Barth came on. He's a very funny comic, and he shared his recovery story is
oh my god,
unbelievable.
It's amazing. He still does stand up and stuff too, and it's like he had to fight all the way back.
Dude, I almost broke down when he told this. Like I haven't had that happen on the podcast before, but like that story is out of control, and he just talked about prior to that just the group of people that you guys had and like coming up in that area, and that like Giggles more the like cleaner club, like the like
it's weird because I didn't know which way you were gonna go with it, but you couldn't. Terry Taylor, that was the owner, and you couldn't say fuck on stage. Mm-hmm. He was like not. I guess he's Mormon now again, but like he was like the worst Mormon you've ever seen in your life. Like he didn't drink. I will say he didn't drink, which was convenient for him because then like. He was the bartender too, and he'd make some of the most disgusting. He'd never tasted this shit before, so he was like, "Why do you care?"
I've never met Terry. I've heard from so many people about him.
He's such a character. But like when you say clean, it was clean in that sense, but every other sense, it was like the Wild West. I mean, off stage, it was like cringe. It was all the shit now where you'd get canceled. Like it was like, as I mean, it was bad. I mean, like, whatever. It was not clean.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. It was just this arbitrary thing where don't say fuck on stage.
Mhm.
And I think that was more like he just wanted to have, I don't know if it was like a business thing or I don't know how personal it was to him.
Dude, I heard I had Tyler Smith come on, who like runs a dope show and shit, and he told the story the first time he went up there, and there was like this guy who was doing an impression of being a little person while wearing like
Kelly Farnsworth, dude, the K-Man. I'll talk about Kelly, dude. He is hilarious. So this dude, this is the end because Tyler's. You know, I don't know how old Tyler is, but he was towards the end of Giggles.
Yeah, that was his first time going up.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So Kelly strolled in, and it's kind of like the club was on its way out, at least from Terry's standpoint, because there was a lawsuit and an agreement, and then he was basically given like 2 years left to run the club.
Okay.
And so he knew he was done. So when you know that, it's like senioritis for 2 years. Like, as weird as it got so much weirder and darker and like he would be the only person working in the building. So like he might have like 150, 200 people show up. He would take the tickets. He would have them come by the bar. They would go, what do you want? It's like Bud Light. It's like, what else do you want? And like, what do you mean? It's like, it's a 2-drink minimum. It's like, okay, but do I have to get it right now? He's like, yeah. So people would walk out, I guess, another Bud Light. So they're all double fisting their like 2 rum and cokes or whatever, and then they go around and they sit down, and that was it. And then that's how he'd run the show. So he's security, he's waiter,
all the above.
So Kelly showed up when he like and filled this sort of vacuum because Kelly could like do like light construction. So he built a that handicap ramp that's it in Laughs Now.
Yeah.
Kelly built that because I think Terry was going to get in trouble or something. He installed the hood fan in the kitchen. So he would just do like very like big projects, but Kelly wanted to be on stage so bad, and he was so hacky and not funny, but he's this big, loud personality, and he would just steal other people's acts. But luckily for us, he only liked stuff like you said, pretending to be a midget or stripping or like singing songs and all this shit. And so, okay, the one thing I'll say is one time, and Kelly had money, weird. I don't know. He used to drive a Humvee, like an actual Humvee, like a yellow Hummer. And he said he owned all these soccer fields or something, but then he was also like, he would throw cash around. But the point is, somehow, I think it was because he installed the hood fan, Terry let him host for Jeff Ross, right?
Okay.
And so I was middling, but no one's getting paid except for Jeff Ross. That's the other point. But Kelly, Terry puts on the tickets when it's somebody like Jeff Ross, like, hey, this is a rated R show. Getting back to the point of the club being clean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like billed as like a dirty show. So Kelly, so it's running late, of course, because it always is, and Terry's just screaming like, "Kelly, start the show!" Because Kelly has to go do the sound and turn on the music and bring himself up and all this shit. So Terry's at the bar. He's like, "Kelly, start the show!" But Kelly, his opening number is he puts on all this fucking extra clothes because he's got to tear it off and reveal whatever he's going to reveal and sing this song. And so I just remember, and there's no green room, you know, there's just the kitchen. So Kelly's in the kitchen putting on like giant yellow parachute pants, and Terry's just screaming from the bar like, "Kelly," and there's customers and everything. "Kelly, we gotta start the show, and then you hear just Kelly scream from the kitchen. He's like, "Terry, I'm putting on my pants." And these customers are like, what the fuck? We're seeing this giant celebrity, this guy who's been on every roast in the history of roasts. And they're like, what's going on in this place? And so Kelly goes on stage. And in Kelly's mind, you know, he's like, oh, it's Jeff Ross. You know, he's like just jizzing himself with his celebrity stuff. And he's like, it's the dirty show. He put it in his head. It's the dirty show. So the only way Kelly made his stuff dirty was he just added fucks in the middle of his songs.
Okay.
So I forget how his song was, but it, you know, some stupid thing
We pulled up one of them.
Oh yeah,
like,
it's on YouTube. Oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah. If you're watching this, go to Kelly Farnsworth YouTube. I have I swear to God, I still have a poster. Because he had a weekend. He actually Terry gave him a whole weekend because he said he could sell out the place, and he got one of those spotlight machines.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To go in front, like the bat signal. You know, and they're just going back. It's like who is? Like 12 people showed up, but.
That's not a good alley for one of those lights.
No,
like,
and what would you would see that and you go, well, what? Why?
Yeah,
What?
It doesn't make any sense there.
So he just starts saying fucking this, fucking that, fucking, and Terry just goes up. He's so mad because Terry's like, yeah, Jeff Ross is. He's like, this is horrible, and he like just cuts his mic, and it's very awkward. And Terry and him getting a screaming match, but that was just like.
And then you had to middle.
Yeah, and then I had to go up.
Like what?
Clean that up.
So Drew said that like there was sort of like a process there, or like you guys could get a fair amount of stage time and like got better quicker. Like, were you part of that, or were you bouncing around, or like?
No, I was definitely that. I was like in the stable, so there's no, other clubs. I'm always jealous of clubs like, I don't know, like Comedy Works in Denver or something, where they have this like it's like a college or something, like. You apply for this. Did you get in? Did you get passed or not passed?
Mm-hmm.
Or then you're on a list, and then you send your avails in every week, and then they tell you what shows you're on. Like it was like very organized, you know. Giggles was like all unspoken. So you really, it was just vibes. You're like, am I in? I don't know. He put me on this show, but he would never tell you either.
So you would just go show up.
You go to the open mics. You'd hang out. He'd put out a list just arbitrarily. He just made the list of people and the names. He made it like a batting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
You go, okay, you're hitting third, you're hitting fourth. Like you stink. We're gonna put you last, or you put you first, just to get you out of the way. Then you would hang out on the weekend shows. And first of all, if you had to like, he might charge you if he doesn't recognize you. So you kind of had to know that you've been around enough to even get in on the weekend shows. Then you'd hang out and you just wait. And it was like, again, like baseball, like the bullpen. You go 5 minutes before the show, you go, okay, you, and then you. Now for like Jeff Ross or bigger acts, maybe because he wanted someone to pick him up from the airport or something, he would predetermine it. But so I got in pretty early, and I think he liked me just because I was really young and quiet. I didn't know any better. I would just wanted to people pleaser. I just wanted to go on stage. So if he was like yelling at us to go get ice and shit, then I was like, all right, I guess that's how it works, And so, but you got it. And this was back before. So this was, I started in college. So this was like 2008, 2009, I was hanging out. And so like there weren't like a ton of comedians at that time. There was like a real dip. I would show up at open mic, sometimes like 3 or 4 comics. So yeah, stage time was like unlimited.
Dude, it's so
like you could do open mics, and they might ask you like, do you have 25 minutes? We've got a crowd. Like I remember Terry was out of town, and this guy Tracy, this really funny comic, was running the bar, and he was like,
oh, Tracy
Tufts.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about him.
Yeah. And
didn't he beat Hedberg in the competition like after being like 2 years in or something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, but I believe it for sure.
Yeah, Jeff Rousseau told me that.
Yeah, Tracy's unbelievable comic. Super funny dude. But he I remember him, it was Brad Brake, I think, was hanging out at the open mic, RAP. And I remember Tracy going, can you just do 40? Because I'm sure Terry wouldn't be mad if I gave you some beers, because we had like 25 people in the open mic and there was like 2 comics,
Mm-hmm.
You know what's funny about Brad, though? Brad Brake was a funny comic. He died, unfortunately. But he had this closer where he's super funny. When I tell you this closer, you're going to think like he's like a big hack. But he's just crazy. Or he was just crazy. And he was hilarious. You would have loved him. He just was always impersonating wrestlers like nonstop, just doing Rowdy Piper, like no context too, just walking up to you in a character, So then
running promos.
Yeah, just screaming at you, He was a very funny guy, but in his closer he would dance around in a thong. So when I say that, it sounds hacky.
I think that's what that video I saw too.
Yeah, you saw that video
Yeah.
of Brad? Yeah. So, oh yeah, and Kelly. Kelly might have stole that bit. But one time, so it was that night, I think, Tracy was like, hey, can you do like 45 minutes just because, and now normally on an open mic, I don't know if enough people know, but you do like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 at Giggles because it was so loose. But so Brad's like, sure, and he stayed in the bar the whole time. I watched because I just went on, and then Brad went on, and then he did 40, and then he closed with the thong thing. And then it occurred to me, I was like, wait, he just wears the thong all the time just in case. Like he's Spider-Man, like he didn't think he was going to be doing 45 minutes. No. He wasn't going to do the thong thing on an open mic. That's
just what he wears.
He's just what he wears. So I was very impressed by that.
So like how long were you doing it before you moved to LA?
I moved to Boston before LA. So I think I was doing it for like 3 years before I moved to Boston.
But you had a shitload of stage time.
Yeah, I had. Well, so it's interesting, right? Because it sounds great. Like it's like you can build time really fast, and it's true. You can physically do 45 probably a lot faster than most people. But it also, I think what I learned when I got to Boston was that it can build bad habits.
Oh yeah.
So like you've got too much time. You don't need to get to you know what I mean? You're so loose because it's like nothing really matters. There's, you don't have to get out. When you only have like, when I moved to Boston, every set was like 3 to 5 minutes, and then it was serious. Like, so I had to learn to tighten everything up. I think that was like good for me, because otherwise, a lot of the Giggles comics were very wordy and pontificators, and so you have to go to other scenes to kind of like clean that up. I mean, it would have happened too in like LA or New York or
where were you getting up in Boston?
Well, the mics, when I first moved there, Dick Doherty's Comedy Vault, which I don't think is still there anymore. The Comedy Studio was big.
Was Nick was that run of Nick's and
Nick's was there. I didn't do Nick's a lot. I think I did it a few times, but it wasn't like my go-to place. There was like the Comedy Studio was sort of like my, where I hung out the most, I'd say, and that was where like all the like showcases were happening there. So like when the Eddie Brill would come down with like the Letterman thing, that was always at the Comedy Studio. So I had that on my pedestal. And then, there's like Sally O'Brien's, and there's this one.
I didn't know you were in Boston. Like, what drove you going to Boston?
Well, so do you know Brian Moot? You ever met him or heard of him?
I don't think so.
So we started together. Me, him, like Jeff Dye, Mike Cummings, like Lucas Seeley. We kind of all were on the same Giggles class.
I've worked with Lucas a few different times. But.
Yeah. So, we Brian had moved there for grad school, went to Boston College. And then I was still in Seattle, and like he was doing stand up a lot out there, kind of like getting a foothold. And he kind of pitched me on it. And I was at the radio station working for Cairo Radio, the news station, just on the desk, and they were going to offer me a full-time like editor job, like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I really had no reason to say no, other than I knew I did not want to do that, So I was like living at my parents' house. This was like, I was basically right after college. And I was like, I guess I'll move to Boston just to not take that job.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had to tell my parents why I wasn't.
How old were you?
Oh, 23, I guess.
Okay.
22.
I mean, you started young. If you start in
college. I started 19, 20 years old, And then, but looking back on it, Brian is one of my best friends. But I'm pretty sure Brian just wanted a car out in Boston. So he's like, yeah, come to Boston, bring your car so I can go do more gigs. No, but it was fun. And like some of those Boston comics are like my best comedy friends still, like I bonded really quickly with those guys. And
Was it still as much like I've talked about this on here a few times, but I watched that documentary When Stand Up Stood Out, and it's about the Boston scene and just like how it was compared to New York in the, I think in the 80s.
It's less of the rivalry stuff. I mean, like, I think like, so when I went out there, Shane Moss was still there.
Mm-hmm.
He was, or no, maybe he had gone too by the time, but he would come back a lot. Like guys had already moved to New York, but would come back, like Joe List and Mike Kaplan. And these guys had moved, but they were just around a lot because I think they just love Boston and the scene was so good.
When I was in New York, I did the like smallest show possible with Mike Kaplan. Like,
oh, really?
He walked in and it just, I could not believe he still did the show because I had just seen him headline.
He's a machine, man. He's a robot. He will not. I've seen him on some bad LA shows too, and he's always like, I don't think it affects him at all. No. Very
fucking funny. But was the network of like one-nighters around Boston still at that time?
I wouldn't have known because I didn't climb quickly enough to ever find out. Like the thing that's true about Boston is the logjam thing where nobody leaves. So like all those guys in that movie are still there.
Oh yeah.
You know? So
or
like
dead.
You're still competing. Yeah, or dead. So you're still competing with all these like monsters from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so that pushes everybody down. So like you're lucky to get, I think I did a couple things for Dick Doherty out in like Worcester and stuff, and did the Kowloon. I don't know if you've heard of that one. That's the famous Chinese place that
yeah.
That might be closing or just closed or something. I don't know, but I did some paid gigs, but mostly it was like spot money at bar shows and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And, so what was the move then? Did you go back to Seattle? Or
yeah,
LA?
I just ran out of money. I was having a blast, but just ran out of money because all the money I saved staying at my parents' house working at the radio station was basically blown through in a year. And so I didn't even tell anybody. There was a club called Motley's, and I did my spot, and my buddy Jason for some reason was in town, and we just drove to Chicago that night. Stopped in Chicago and then drove 2 more stops back to Seattle. And like
that's a long fucking drive.
It's a long drive. I did it both ways. I've been on every inch of I-90.
Yeah.
Because Seattle,
it goes straight
over the
through.
bridge all the way, you know what I mean? So I've been on every inch of it. And what's funny about that though is I didn't tell anybody, but it was the ultimate Irish exit. You know what I mean? Like I literally, everybody was like just texting me like, "Hey, do you want to go do this?" Like, I left town. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I was just like embarrassed to tell them why. I was like, I don't want to say like
2011 or something.
Yeah, it was just a year. So I feel like I started. It was like 2 years. I'm so bad with years, but it was like feels like it was 2 years just doing stand up after college. Maybe only a year of that in Seattle, and then just a year in Boston. Because I had my Motley's Comedy Club had a softball team in the league. You know, there was the Comedy Studio, Motley's, and there was like 2 other. Nick's, I think, had a team, and it's a big deal there. This guy Tom Dustin's like the commissioner, and it's like serious. I got traded on draft day. Like they have a draft, and he traded me when he found out I sucked. And so I left, but I had my jersey still, and I remember they wanted me to mail back. I was like, no, I paid for this shit. I'm not mailing it back.
That's
like,
so funny.
No.
So how long were you back in Seattle before going to LA?
About a year,
okay.
I think. And so by then, Brian and Jeff and I think Lucas were all in LA already. And it just seemed like, have you ever seen that movie, Orange County?
Yeah.
You know that line where he's like, why do you even want to go to college? He's like, because that's what you do after high school. Like he doesn't have a good answer. Like it's
Tom Hanks' son.
Yeah. That's me in LA where like, they're like, why are you going to LA? I was like, that's what you do. Yeah. Like you can only do stand up for so long before you go to the next place, you know? So
and you wanted to do writing, right?
Not really. No. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do stand up. Mm-hmm. That's all I liked. It's funny when I think about it now, but like how naive, but like I liked hanging out. I liked talking to comics. I like doing spots. I liked writing jokes. I like the writing jokes part.
Yeah.
And then I liked doing stand-up. And then I liked hanging out after. I didn't like nothing else about show business was very appealing to me at all.
So you went to show business capital.
So I went to the show business capital. I'm like, here I am.
It
I'm
seems
ready.
like New York would have been a much better fit. At least just from like a lifestyle standpoint.
For sure it would have. I mean like yes, like, and I had obviously like things were great in LA and like met my wife and I got a lot of work and.
Did you do late night there? Like
yeah,
that's where you got it.
So I got Conan there, and I really got James Corden when I was the guy. Like, I mean, he messaged me on my website or whatever. So like, I guess I could have been anywhere, but I was still living in LA when he hit me up. It just because of COVID and everything didn't happen till.
I don't think
later.
I've had anybody on that's like talked about doing late night before.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what was that experience like? Because I watch your late night sets, and I just like what the first time you did it versus the second. Like,
yeah,
it had to have been nerve-wracking.
Extremely different. The first one was obviously what you would think, way more nerve-wracking. Like, first of all, it was Conan who, like, James Corden's great, but like Conan was who I was watching growing up.
Oh yeah.
So he's like elevated in your mind even above. You know,
we're close in age. I think.
Yeah,
You're,
yeah.
What are you?
I'm 37.
Okay, I'm 33.
Okay, yeah.
So like, I remember fucking every night Conan.
Conan
like, that
was the guy.
the
I mean,
shit.
he's the funniest dude in the world, and he still is, in my opinion. I think he's still the best one going. But like so I brought a crew. I mean, it was like such a big deal. They were like, "Do you want a car?" Because we live like 10 minutes from the studio or whatever. Like, do you want a car? It's like, yeah, I want the car. I want the biggest black town car you have or whatever. Me and my wife were like dressed up even before the show. She was my wife at the time. Or no. Yeah, we had just gotten married actually. Yeah. And so we got dressed up, you know, and like walk out there. We're taking her friend Anna's taking pictures of us just as we're walking into the stupid car. Like, so it was so like
just overdone.
Relishing it. Yeah. I think I had like 10 of my friends come. The green room was packed, you know. And so you don't see that one. I didn't meet Conan ahead of time. Didn't meet like Andy Richter or anything ahead of time. And so literally they do the show. You're just sitting in this green room with your friends, you know, eating all the free food and stuff. And the show starts. Like, people talk to you and tell you what's going to happen, and they show you the little star that you have to go stand on and stuff. And JP, the guy who was booking it, was like talking me through stuff and everything. They always have like a guy who just books, you know, stand up. And so that was JP Buck at the time. And so then, but like the show starts and you're like, oh wow, the show's starting. And you're just watching it on TV. And they film it just like you would see it at home. They don't like do it out of order or anything. So it's like boom, boom, boom. You're like, oh man, I'm going to be next. And then you're like, your friends all go out into the studio.
Did you take like beta blockers or anything for it?
I wouldn't have even known what that was at the time. I was just shitting my pants.
Really?
I was like so nervous.
Was it the most nervous you've been for anything in stand-up?
By far. Yeah. I mean, I opened for Attell and Joe Coy one time at the Moore Theater. Yeah. And I remember sweating through my shirt, you know?
I did what's the Neptune?
Yeah.
With Stanhope.
Oh my God, yeah.
I was 10 months into doing stand-up.
Oh my God. And many people like freaks you out at that point.
Like that, I don't know, more is what, 3,000 or something?
Yeah, it's not as much as, it's not it's might be like 1,800. I know it's smaller than the Paramount.
Yeah.
But it's like in between those. But
like 750 felt like, yeah, like the people that do theaters, I can't.
And it's hard because, you know, when you say you're opening for them, like there's no announcement. There's you walk out.
Yeah, it's so
they turn the lights down and you walk out.
Yeah.
And no one gives a shit about your first 20 minutes. Like,
no.
They're like, all you have to do is be doing good by the last 60 seconds. That's all that really matters.
Yeah.
You know?
So compared to that, though, it was
more nerve-wracking because there was just so much. I mean, and plus, I'm telling everybody, you know, like, I want, you know,
gotta
like,
set yourself
everybody
up.
back home, like, you know, I'm like, I'm gonna be on Conan, why, you know, and also in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna kill it, and then I'm gonna be famous, and then it's all gonna change. I really thought I was like, okay, now, like, it was a line. Like, before, I was a broke nobody, now I've made it.
Yeah.
And all these clubs are going to come calling. All these ones that turned me down, they're all going to want me.
Yeah.
So
And that happened exactly how
yeah,
you
exactly
thought.
how it happened. That's look at me now. I'm in this basement.
You're doing my podcast.
Airbnb. So I'm standing backstage by myself, and you're finally on your own after like 4 hours of waiting around. Like you're like by yourself. And there's just these two sort of union dudes talking about their lawns or whatever, and they're just holding the ropes, and they're not talking to you. You're just standing there, and then they just pull the ropes, and you're on TV. I mean, there's no one like petting your shoulder, like, okay, man, you're gonna kill it. Don't worry. So you just walk out and you start. Conan said. So then I did my first bit, and if you watch it, you can see it happen. It's like, to me, it felt like an eternity, but it's really a half a second. But I for sure I got my first bit out, and I got a good pop on like the line, on the punchline. And so that like calmed me down so much that like I just went zen and just completely, my head blanked, and I just turned over to Conan, and like you can see it on my face, but I'm like almost want to say like, what do you guys want to talk about? But then I trip a little bit, and then I find it, and it's I don't think you can really notice unless you're
if
you're looking for it, you can see it. But then the Corden one, and then Conan was cool after, and we talked about Seattle and stuff because his wife is from there, and he was super nice, and that was it. And we partied, and it was great. The Corden one was so different because it was like COVID. The Delta I think it was Delta or Omicron. One of those was like raging. And I was like, it's going to get canceled. I just like didn't tell anybody. I was like, it's for sure going to get canceled. And I fly down there. They test me. I'm by myself. They're like, you can't bring anybody. I'm wearing a mask. So I just walk in. It's very low key. They're on skeleton crew, I'm in this very nice green room. But then he comes and says what's up before the show. So that was different. They do like a little green room bit thing that I did. And I had I think it was like a funny idea for that. And it came off really good. But again, like I wasn't even nervous because it's like you just felt there wasn't like a ton of people around.
Yeah.
And this is backstage. They had a full audience. But like it just felt very sort of like people making shit in their basement or something, it just felt very like low key, and I didn't have anybody with me, so it didn't even feel that real. But then it was like Jessica Chastain and Penelope Cruz were the other two, so they're just over there. But then it's like, I don't know, it was just I was not really that nervous at all for that one.
Yeah, that's just I'm so glad we're on the other side of some of that shit, because it's just, I mean, for somebody like you too, like it's different when I'm still cutting my teeth. I'm still like developing and doing all this shit. Like to have your hour, to like be touring, to be doing all that stuff, to like not be able to flex that muscle and do that. I mean, you're back to traveling now. What's that like?
It's just like you would never know anything, especially now with the masks and the airport thing. Now it's like if you wear a mask on a plane, you're the weird one, So it's like, and honestly, Seattle, Portland, these are some of the places in the country that took it more seriously than anywhere else. Like if you went to Phoenix at any point, like after, so it was March 2020, like it was bad there for like, I would say by that summer, I don't think Phoenix you wouldn't even.
No, I was in Phoenix for a period of time. Like
I had a line. I did a club there, this club called Stir Crazy, during the before vaccines. Like I probably shouldn't have done it, but I just needed the money, And I remember I had a line about something like, it was a dumb COVID joke, and basically the punchline had to be the last place you'd want to be for COVID. Like, so what is the worst place possible you'd want to be during a pandemic? And Dave and Buster's was like what I came up with. Like nobody, like kids are touching shit.
Yeah.
You're tight indoors,
the ball
drinking,
pit.
The ball pit. Yeah. So it's like, that's the worst place you'd want to be during COVID. And literally I'm walking to the club. There is a Dave and Buster's, and there is a line out the door. I'm like, well, that bit's not going to work.
Yeah, that's dude. Phoenix was such a trip to be down there.
Yeah,
because I went down that I was like there for 9 months in Seattle during lockdown, and I just
Yeah.
like, dude, I was going crazy, and I have family in Phoenix, so I drove down, and it was just the complete. I mean,
Yeah.
people were taking it so seriously in Seattle, and then it started fucking with me where I was like, it is nobody but our state.
Yeah,
Like,
it's when you realize like we're the one like, and then you're online and like smart people on Twitter are taking it very seriously. So you get this sort of warped idea
it
of
felt
what
like the 2016 election. Like,
Yeah.
like,
and
whoa.
I feel like I had good insight into that because I was doing a lot of colleges right before the election, and I remember I was in Wisconsin, and I talked to these kids afterwards, like, oh, you guys excited? You can vote. You know, you're gonna like they're all like, this is the first presidential election they can vote in, and they're like, yeah, what's the point? And this was when Hillary was like 10 points up in the polls or whatever. She's like a shoe-in to win. Like, yeah, what's the point? I go, oh, you know, Wisconsin is a swing state. It might be close. And they go, nah, Trump's going to win. And I was like, what? And like, yeah, because you think from their perspective, all they're seeing is Trump billboards everywhere. And so they like literally, when you live in rural Wisconsin, there is you could go 100 miles without seeing a Hillary sign, but you'll see 500 Trump
Same
signs.
way in Seattle though. Like,
Yeah,
just the opposite.
The opposite
thing.
in the city, but if you go out rural, you know, so it's like it's become such a rural urban divide that these kids thought Wisconsin wasn't going to be close. It literally came down to like 500 votes or something, you know? So that's the crazy part about being a road comic is you have to go out of your bubble all the time and you see what real America is either way. Like there's some people, like I said, those if you live in rural Wisconsin, you think the country's one way, but if they visited Seattle, they'd
be like, what?
Their mind would be blown, you know, like a Black Lives Matter sign or something, they would lose their shit. So.
So how much are you traveling now? Like out of a given month, like what's
well, this last a lot lately, it just kind of depends. It's going to slow down here this summer, which is good because it's been too busy. You know, I got the baby now and stuff, and so I don't like to be gone too much, but you also feel like it's fine. I was just talking about this, but like you book most of the stuff like 6 months to a year before it comes, and your financial situation might be way different.
Yeah.
So like sometimes you're on a gig and you're like, why the fuck am I in, you know, this stupid town for whatever X amount of money? What am I? Am I a loser?
Yeah.
What am I?
And
what
then
was
you
I
remember,
thinking?
oh yeah,
and you're
I
like,
didn't have.
oh yeah, when I booked this, I was like, I'm gonna need this.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I mean? Like you're desperate, so you always try to. Anyway, it's like twice a month you leave, I think is the average. It just depends how long you're gone for.
Yeah.
So like it's okay for me to be gone twice a month if I'm going for the weekend. But when these longer ones, when it's like a week or, you know, longer, that's the ones I try to avoid these days.
And then during the week, are you just doing local stuff or what do you?
Yeah, I'll just do spots, you know, like Helium's great for that. It's a good club here. And then there's just there's a show on Wednesdays at like a pizza place. It's very consistently good called Dough. There's this McMinimum's downtown.
Yeah, I did that.
You did that one?
Al's
Yeah.
down.
That one's a trip because
It's hotel.
full,
Yes. Yeah.
and you're like, oh, it's Friday night. It's full. It's going to be rock. And it's such a road room because it's all like rural Oregon, Washington tourists.
Dude,
who are like,
how great is the room? It's like
it's a perfect.
It's like
it looks
New
like
York,
a comedy club.
Yeah,
and you get to walk down steps into a basement. Like it's dope.
Shout out to Brandon Lyons. He hosts that
Yeah.
room, and he's very funny, and he's like he treated me well. Like
he does a good job with those guys too because he knows. Sometimes it's like I've had some of the funnest sets I've had here in Portland there, and then other times it's like you feel like you're working. You know?
Oh
like,
yeah, that's how I felt.
These guys like expect a show and like are not Portland people.
Yeah,
you know?
I got my ass handed to me on one show. Because
that can happen.
Dude, this is the first night in 22 nights that I haven't had a show. I just had a
nice.
crazy month, and like
that feels good though, right?
Dude, I'm glad to be here with you. Like
Yeah,
I was so 2 nights ago, I was like talking about it, I'm just like once you've like done when you're not like writing and like doing mics enough, like
Yeah.
you get beat up, like you like bruise it and you don't have time to like recover and like look at like you don't have time to write and
your
fix the
jokes have
holes.
no meaning anymore. Like that would have, I don't know if you have ever done or do these comedy competitions or anything, but by the end of those,
I have 3 in the next 3 months.
Yeah, it's like torture because then like, what are the 3? You have 3 competitions?
I'm in one right now. And
what
then
is that? Which one is that?
Nate Jackson's.
Oh, okay.
And then The Voice for Tacoma, which I did last year.
Okay.
And then Sick, hopefully, assuming
I
get a spot.
So like by the end of those, because you have to run your best shit over and over and over and over again, the jokes have no meaning. Like it's like you can't even. You're like, why is this funny?
And even if you do run your best shit, usually there's like additional circumstances that are out of your control. So it's like Andrew Frank, who I think you probably know him. He's from Seattle.
I don't, not off the top of my head, but I'm bad with names sometimes.
He did he's done, I think he's like 17 or 18 years in. He was saying with competitions, like just look at it as like a book show and go and like do your best stuff for that point in time and have fun with it. And like if you win,
that's good
like,
advice.
Because it's just a lot of that's out of your control. Like you want to do your best, but you also don't want to like burn yourself out with
the best. That's good advice. Like just do the show like you would normally, because you're always trying to do good. You never do a show and you're like, I think I'm gonna give him the B. I met this guy one time at Giggles. He was like the feature, which is rare because it must have been like the headliner negotiated to bring him in. And he was just talking about how much time he had, and he went on stage. He goes, and he did good. I guess he did good. I usually didn't watch. And then he goes, yeah, and that was the B material. It's like, well, why would you ever give someone your B material?
Yeah, what the fuck is that? I mean?
It's like if you have like 3 hours of material, you just have an hour, and then the other 2 hours is shit you shouldn't have kept.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
so weird.
But the other advice I would, because basically competitions are either audience judged or like critic, or like there's a panel. Of my advice is always just do the show that you think you're going to kill the hardest with. Never, I used to think like, oh, there's these judges here, these industry is here.
Yeah.
And so I would do it
elevated
stand, and like this might go over their heads or whatever, but this is going to be good. They're going to think this is so funny. And they're as fucking susceptible to just the room as anybody.
Anyone is.
Don't give anyone extra credence like they're some joke aficionado.
Oh yeah.
So that's a mistake I've made before.
Well, we're like, I don't know, we're at 50 in. You have a fucking story that I think is it'd be a good thing to wrap up.
Is
there anything before we tell this, like anything you can plug, just your podcast,
Yeah, so I got a podcast called the Cavalry podcast. Everyone says the Cavalry. It was a very bad name, but we're like pot committed. So it's me and this guy, Johnny Beaner. You can find it anywhere. I have an album out. It's called Rockstar. You can get that on iTunes or Apple Music. That's about it these days with all these streaming wars taking comedy down. But and then
you got Dry Bar.
And it should be a second one coming at some point.
Hell yeah.
They haven't told me exactly when yet.
And then do you have any social media?
Yeah, it's just at Andrew Sleighter on everything, Instagram, Twitter, all that, and it's SLEIGHTER.
Perfect.
How you spell Slater. And so we were talking about being on the road and stuff, and that's I do fly. I go to the airport a lot, and the one way that you know what? Okay, this is what happened. So like my wife never takes me to the airport because it would be unfair to like you're gonna drop me, and this was when we were in LA, and like to drop me off at LAX more than once a year is an insane ask to anybody. So it's like I usually just take an Uber or whatever. And But this one time, she's like, you know what? You're gonna be gone for a while. Why don't I take you to the airport and we'll get breakfast on the way there? And so we're doing shit and getting ready and whatever. But and then somehow it happened where I was like, we're just going out for breakfast in my head. So we just go. We go to breakfast. And I was like, oh, that was great. And it's like, okay, now go the rest of the way to the airport. It's like, okay, cool. And we get to the airport and I get out of the car and I realized I didn't bring any bags. Like literally no. Like it's like you're just staring at the empty trunk. And you're like, well, what the what? I was lucky I brought my ID.
Yeah.
So it's like, but there's nothing to do. You know, you have to just go into the airport.
Yeah.
And
she was dropping you off?
Yeah, and she dropped me off. So it's like, I was like, what do I do? And she was like,
go to the airport.
Go, you know? So it was like a college gig in Indiana. And I remember, and it was also like, it wasn't just Indianapolis. It was like then a smaller, I think. All I remember is there was a moment where I'm like walking off a plane. It was a small enough plane where it didn't hitch up to the terminal. Mm-hmm. So I was literally walking off a plane with no bags. And I did feel like Jason Bourne. I was like, yeah, I'm fucking an assassin or something.
It's been so bored on that flight too. Just sitting there with nothing.
Well, I had my phone. I had my, which is basically, but yeah, I had, and then it's like, so I get the rental car. You know, and I was like, I guess I'll go to Walmart, you know? And I bought all this shit at Walmart. And they sell luggage at Walmart. But that didn't occur to me at the time. So now I'm walking through the Indianapolis airport, and all I've got is 2 Walmart plastic sacks filled with all of my dirty socks and underwear. And I walked up to the counter. I was very embarrassed. And also, like, plastic... I don't know if this makes sense to other people, but that's like a novelty for us living in Portland or Seattle. Like we don't have those type of plastic sacks. You have the reusable hard plastic bags. These were like the old school ones where you could rip a hole in them easy. Like
the
very ghetto
like Chinese
restaurant.
Sack.
Yeah, the kind that like have created a 14-mile garbage island in the ocean or whatever. Yeah, so it was those. And I walked up to the ticket and I wanted to check them. I was like, I do not want to carry these. And I'm like, you can't check these.
Plastic bags.
Shit's going to go everywhere, you know? So I go through security and it's like, all I remember is I call my wife and I was like, this is you know, what do I do? Everyone's making fun of me. She goes, well, did you tie the sack shut? Like, oh, yeah, that would have classed it up. Nobody would have noticed. Just 2 tied.
Just get a stick and hang it over the back of it.
Yeah. So then I get to security. Or I get through security, which is very embarrassing. And just putting those on the conveyor belt. Do you ever put something on the conveyor belt and it's not heavy enough to actually go through the little... And you have someone has to like
a log jam.
Like, yeah, I know. That's
like your shit gets in somebody else's.
Yeah, and it's all socks are falling out and stuff. And so then I get there to my seat and where my gate is, and like again, fly a lot. And this is good advice too. Smart. Stick to an airline. You should just be Alaska Airlines all the time. And I know sometimes you're like, oh, it's more expensive. It's worth it. I promise you it's worth it. And one way that it's worth it is that sometimes you get bumped up to first class. And I got bumped up to first class on my Walmart plastic sacks flight. And people were so confused. Like, literally, I didn't know until, like, right before on the app it shows up. And then they call first class, and I stand up. My Walmart. They're like,
sacks.
The Walmart dude? The Walmart dude has first class? And so... I went on there. I felt like it was in Pretty Woman, you know?
Yeah.
Ooh, remember me? Big mistake. So then I get on the plane and the flight attendant is like, what? How did this dude get on the plane?
Do you have any bags? Just these?
I was like, hang these with the other coats. And that was it. So
Did they give you like champagne or anything?
Yeah. I was like, I will have some champagne. No, I don't need a glass. Just fill up the Burger King cup. and
That's so funny.
we're gonna be on our way. So,
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on.
yeah,
I really
thanks,
appreciate it. This
thanks
was
for
fun.
having me. This
And,
was awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely push stuff for your podcast on our end too. If you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, notifications bell. If you're just listening to us, do the same. Rate, review us, leave a comment. That helps us with the, whatever technology we're using at this point.
Yeah.
And make sure to follow us on Instagram at FNFPod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the ways, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the ways, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. My wave pool, my wave pool. Welcome to 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 my